What happens when unchecked arrogance collides with immense hidden power? In the crowded, chaotic terminal of JFK Airport, a gate agent puffed up with a tiny bit of authority makes a snap judgment. She looks at a black woman standing in the first-class line, a woman of elegance and poise, and sees only someone who doesn't belong. With a sneer, she directs her to the back of the economy line. She doesn't know she's speaking to Dr. Imani Carter, the CEO of a billion-dollar tech firm, and she has no idea that with one silent, almost invisible gesture on her phone, Dr. Carter is about to not just miss her flight, but cancel it for her entire 50-person team, triggering a corporate catastrophe that will cost the airline millions and unravel a web of devastating personal consequences. This isn't just a story about a clapback. It's about the earth-shattering impact of a single silent choice. The atmosphere inside John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 was a familiar symphony of controlled chaos. The vast vaulted ceilings designed to inspire a sense of wonder and possibility did little to quell the low-grade anxiety thrumming through the thousands of travelers. It was a river of humanity, families on vacation, weary business travelers, students embarking on adventures, all flowing towards their designated gates. The air carried a unique blend of scents: roasted coffee cleaning solution, the faint metallic tang of jet fuel, and the almost imperceptible hum of human stress. Dr. Imani Carter stood as an island of calm in this rushing river, dressed in a bespoke navy blue pantsuit that was the epitome of understated power. Her posture was impeccable. At 42, she possessed a presence that was both commanding and serene. Her hair was styled in intricate microlocks, adorned with a few delicate gold cuffs that caught the harsh terminal lighting. Her gaze, sharp and intelligent behind a pair of minimalist glasses, swept over the boarding area for Continental Apex Air Flight 710 to London Heathrow. She wasn't just a passenger. She was the architect of the journey. Imani was the founder and CEO of Oratech Innovations, a company that had skyrocketed from a Silicon Valley startup to a global leader in advanced haptic feedback technology. Their proprietary systems were revolutionizing everything, from surgical training simulations to immersive virtual reality experiences. The 50 people scattered around the gate engineers, project managers, and lead designers were her team. They were on their way to the Global Tech Vanguard Summit in London to unveil a groundbreaking new product and finalize a partnership with Neuralink Dynamics, a European behemoth in the medical technology sector. This deal was the culmination of 2 years of relentless work and was poised to triple Oratech's valuation overnight. The stakes were astronomical. Her chief operating officer, David Chen, a man whose calm demeanor masked a fiercely brilliant logistical mind, gave her a subtle nod from across the seating area. He had just finished his final headcount. All 50 team members were present, their tickets, all 50 of them, in first, and business class a non-negotiable perk Imani insisted upon for major international projects were confirmed. Everything was proceeding according to the meticulous plan. Imani felt a familiar flicker of pride. She had built Oratech from the ground up, fueled by coffee sheer force of will and an unshakable belief in her vision. She remembered the early days, begging for venture capital, facing down boards of skeptical, predominantly white male investors who couldn't see past her race and gender to the genius of her patents. She had fought for every inch of her success, and she fiercely protected the team that had helped her achieve it. Treating them well wasn't just good policy, it was a moral imperative. The boarding announcement for Flight 710 crackled to life. We are now pleased to begin boarding for Continental Apex Air Flight 710, with service to London Heathrow. We would like to invite our first-class passengers along with our Apex Diamond and Platinum members to board at this time through the priority lane." Imani picked up her sleek leather briefcase and her carry-on, a modest but expensive piece of luggage, and moved toward the priority lane. Several of her senior staff, who were also ticketed for the front cabin, began to follow suit. The rest of the team knew the drill they would board with their respective business class zones. The gate was managed by 2 agents. One was a young man, polite and efficient, scanning passports with a practiced rhythm. The other was a woman in her late 40s, whose name tag read Cynthia Vance. Cynthia had a pinched expression, as if she'd just tasted something sour. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes, a flat shade of blue, seemed to scan the line, not for passengers, but for discrepancies. She radiated an air of world-weary authority, the kind wielded by those in small kingdoms who believe their power is absolute. As Imani approached, Cynthia's eyes locked onto her. She bypassed the white businessman in front of Imani with a cursory glance at his ticket, but her gaze lingered on Imani, traveling from her face down to her shoes and back up again. It was a look Imani knew well. It was the look of assessment, of categorization, of a mind working through a checklist of stereotypes and assumptions. "Good morning," Imani said, her voice even and pleasant, holding out her passport and first-class boarding pass. Cynthia Vance ignored the greeting. She didn't even look at the documents in Imani's hand. Instead, she gestured with a flick of her wrist toward the much longer snaking line next to them. "The economy line is over there, ma'am," she said. Her voice wasn't overtly hostile, but it was laden with a thick, patronizing condescension. The ma'am was not a sign of respect, but a verbal pat on the head. Imani paused. The hum of the terminal seemed to fade into the background. For a brief second, she felt a flash of hot anger, the familiar sting of being misjudged and diminished. She had dealt with this her entire life, in academia, in boardrooms, and now apparently at an airport gate. But she had long ago learned to transmute that fire into a diamond-hard resolve. She would not be flustered. She would not be provoked. "I believe I'm in the correct line," Imani stated calmly, gently pushing her boarding pass another inch forward. "I am a first-class passenger." Cynthia let out a small, disbelieving sigh, the kind one might use for a toddler who insists on putting a square peg in a round hole. "Lots of people believe they're in the right line," she said, a smirk playing on her lips. "The priority lane is for first-class and high-tier status members only. The general boarding line is on the right." She still had not looked at the ticket. Her decision was made, her reality constructed. In her mind, the woman standing before her simply did not fit the profile of a first-class passenger. The suit, the poise, the expensive luggage, Cynthia's prejudice, filtered it all out, leaving only the color of Imani's skin as the determining factor. Behind Imani, David Chen's face tightened. 2 of her other executives, a sharp-witted lawyer named Sophia and a brilliant engineer named Ben, exchanged looks of disbelief. They started to take a step forward, ready to intervene. Imani, without turning, made a minuscule, almost imperceptible gesture, with her free hand a slight downward press. "Stand down, let me handle this." They immediately halted. They trusted their CEO implicitly. "Perhaps," Imani suggested, her voice dropping a fraction, losing its warmth and taking on a polished, steely edge, "you could do me the courtesy of looking at my boarding pass. It might clear up your confusion." The directness of the challenge seemed to startle Cynthia. Her smirk faltered for a second. With an exaggerated theatrical huff, she snatched the boarding pass from Imani's hand. Her eyes scanned the paper. She saw the name Dr. Imani Carter. She saw the seat assignment 1A. She saw the fare class first. For a moment, she was silent. A flicker of something surprise embarrassment crossed her face, but it was instantly smothered by a fresh wave of defensive arrogance. She couldn't possibly admit her error. That would be a surrender of her gateside throne. So she doubled down. She handed the ticket back, not meeting Imani's eyes. My mistake. We've had a lot of people trying to get on early today. System's been glitchy. You can go ahead. She mumbled, her tone still grudging, as if she were granting a favor, rather than performing her basic duty. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of her blatant prejudice. Imani stood her ground. She hadn't moved. The line behind her was beginning to back up. The polite young agent was looking over a concerned expression on his face. A glitchy system, Imani repeated softly, the question hanging in the air like a shard of ice. Is that what we're calling it? Cynthia's face hardened. Do you want to board the plane or not? She snapped her voice now, sharp and impatient. You're holding up the line. It was in that moment that a decision crystallized in Imani's mind. This was no longer about a flight. It wasn't about getting to London on time. It was about a principle. It was about the dozens of similar smaller slights she and her team had endured over the years. It was for every time one of her brilliant black engineers was mistaken for a janitor at a conference, for every time David was complimented on his excellent English, for every time a venture capitalist had asked who the real CEO was. Her company Oratech wasn't just a business, it was a statement. It was proof that excellence had no color, no gender, no predetermined profile. And the woman standing before her with her petty tyranny and casual bigotry had just insulted the very foundation upon which Oratech was built. She would not board this plane. More than that, Oratech would not board this plane. The multi-million-dollar deal could wait. True power wasn't just about having a seat in first class, it was about having the ability to decide whether the plane was even worth flying on. Imani Carter gave Cynthia Vance a long, cool look. It was a look that contained no anger, no malice, only a profound and final judgment. Then she stepped back from the line. The tension at the gate was thick enough to taste. Cynthia Vance, buoyed by what she perceived as a victory, having forced the issue and made the difficult passenger back down, wore an expression of smug vindication. She gestured impatiently to the next person in line, a silver-haired man who scurried forward, eager to escape the awkwardness. Imani, however, hadn't retreated. She had simply taken one step back, creating a small pocket of space around herself. Her team watched her, their expressions a mixture of concern and anticipation. They knew that look on her face. It was the same look she got right before she killed a failing project or pivoted the entire company's strategy on a dime. It was the look of absolute certainty. She calmly set her carry-on bag on the floor beside her and pulled out her phone. It was a sleek, state-of-the-art device, one of Oratech's own prototypes, with a custom haptic interface. Her fingers moved across the screen with practiced, economical grace. There was no theatricality, no angry thumb jabbing. Her movements were as precise and deliberate as a surgeon's. Cynthia glanced over a dismissive sneer on her face. Probably texting her friends to complain, she thought, a flicker of satisfaction running through her. She felt a grim pleasure in putting people she deemed entitled in their place. In her narrative, she was the frontline defender of order and rules against a world of people trying to cheat the system. This woman, with her fancy suit and attitude, was just another one of them. Imani opened a secure encrypted messaging app. She tapped a group chat named Oratech Command. It contained only 3 people herself, David Chen and her executive assistant, back in New York, a logistical prodigy named Maria. She typed a short, clear message. Imani, all personnel. Abort London Transit. Incident at the gate. Full team withdrawal effective immediately. David begin extraction protocol. Maria execute contingency alpha. Charter the Gulf Stream. Destination Farnborough. Have cars ready. Rebook Neuralink meeting for tomorrow. 15:20 GMT. Cite unavoidable logistical failure with our commercial carrier. She hit send. The message was delivered in an instant. The action took less than 15 seconds. It was a silent digital detonation. Across the seating area, David Chen's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, read the message, and his eyes widened slightly. He looked at Imani, who met his gaze with a steady, resolute expression. He gave a single, sharp nod. The order was given. The order would be executed. He immediately stood up. "Oratech team," he said, his voice calm, but carrying an authority that cut through the terminal noise. "Change of plans, grab your bags. We're leaving. Now." The effect was instantaneous and baffling to onlookers. 50 people who just moments before had been settling in for a long-haul flight began to move with quiet, coordinated efficiency. Laptops were snapped shut, bags were zipped, and conversations were cut short. There was no panic, no shouting, just a smooth, disciplined exodus. They moved like a well-drilled unit, because in many ways they were. They trusted their leadership. If Imani and David said, "Move," they moved. Sophia and Ben, who had witnessed the exchange up close, were the first to reach Imani's side. "Are you all right?" Sophia asked, her voice low and laced with concern. "I'm fine," Imani replied, her voice steady. "But our business with Continental Apex Air is concluded, permanently." The mass movement of 50 people away from a boarding gate was impossible to ignore. Other passengers stared, confused. The young, polite gate agent looked on in complete bewilderment, his mouth slightly agape. Cynthia Vance, however, was still processing what was happening. Her initial smugness curdled into confusion. Why were they all leaving? She watched as David Chen approached the young agent, not her. "We are the Oratech group," David said politely, holding up his phone with a list of their names. "All 50 of us. We are withdrawing from this flight. Please process our cancellations. We will require our checked baggage to be returned to us at the main terminal carousel immediately." The young agent's eyes went wide. 50 cancellations from first and business class. The revenue loss from that alone would be staggering, a significant 5-figure sum just vanishing into thin air. He fumbled with his scanner, unsure of the protocol for something of this magnitude. Cynthia finally understood. This wasn't one woman backing down. This was an entire corporate contingent walking away, and the woman she had tried to humiliate was clearly their leader. A cold knot of dread began to form in her stomach. Her small moment of power was rapidly spiraling into a very real, very big problem. She strode over to David, reasserting her authority. "Sir, what's the problem here? You can't just leave. The flight is boarding." David Chen looked at her, his expression unreadable. He was unfailingly polite, but there was a new chill in his voice. "We can and we are. There was an incident. Our CEO was treated unacceptably by your staff. We have standards of professional conduct for our partners and vendors. Continental Apex Air has failed to meet them." He didn't point. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words were precise, clinical, and utterly devastating. He turned his back on her and continued to organize the team's departure. Cynthia's face went from ruddy with anger to pale with shock. "My staff. I was just following procedure." She sputtered, her voice rising in pitch. Imani, who had been watching this exchange in silence, finally spoke. She addressed Cynthia directly, her voice soft but carrying the weight of a final verdict. "Your procedure," Imani said, "was to assume a black woman in a tailored suit couldn't possibly belong in first class. Your procedure was to attempt to publicly humiliate her rather than take 2 seconds to look at her ticket. Your procedure was to be rude, dismissive, and deeply unprofessional. My procedure, she continued, picking up her bag, is to refuse to financially support any organization that employs people like you in customer-facing roles. Oratech will be taking its business elsewhere. We have a multi-million-dollar annual corporate travel account. Rest assured, not another dollar of it will be spent with your airline. Every word landed like a hammer blow. The casual mention of a multi-million-dollar account hung in the air, sucking the oxygen out of the space around the gate. The other passengers were now openly staring, many with their phones out, discreetly recording. A young man with a laptop bag covered in tech stickers watched with rapt attention, his eyes wide with a dawning sense of awe. Cynthia Vance was speechless. Her mind was a whirlwind of denial and panic. It was a mistake, a misunderstanding. This couldn't be happening. She was just doing her job. She looked desperately at the other agent, but he wisely refused to meet her gaze, focusing intently on his computer screen, as if the fate of the world depended on it. With her team now assembled and heading back toward the main terminal, Imani turned to leave. She gave Cynthia one last lingering look. There was no triumph in her eyes, only a quiet, resolute finality. Then, with the silent grace that had defined her every action, she turned and walked away, leaving Cynthia Vance standing alone in the wreckage of her own prejudice, the silent detonation of that single text message still echoing in the suddenly quiet space around Gate B24. The retreat of the Oratech team was a masterclass in controlled chaos. David Chen orchestrated the movement, directing his people toward the terminal exit with the precision of a military commander. Phones were already out, rearranging logistics, cancelling hotels, and informing families of the change in plans. They were disappointed, but resolute, a tangible sense of solidarity uniting them. They had witnessed the insult to their leader, and by extension to the principles of their company. Her stand was their stand. Back at the gate, panic was setting in. The young agent was on his radio, his voice a strained whisper as he tried to explain the situation to a supervisor. "Yes, sir. The entire Oratech party. 50 passengers. First and business? Yes, all of them." Cynthia Vance, still rooted to the spot, felt a cold sweat prickle her skin. The words, multi-million-dollar annual corporate travel account, were replaying in her mind on a loop. This was escalating far beyond a customer complaint. This had career-ending implications. Just then, a man in a slightly too tight airline suit hurried toward the gate, a harried expression on his face. This was Robert Maxwell, the airport's duty operations manager for Continental Apex Air. He was a man whose entire job revolved around putting out fires, and the smoke pouring from Gate B24 was thick and black. "What in God's name is going on here?" he demanded, his eyes darting between Cynthia and the other agent. "I just got a call from Central Ops. We've got a 50-person business group that just cancelled en masse. Explain. Now." The young agent stammered. "So there was a disagreement with a passenger." Cynthia found her voice laced with self-defense. "I was following procedure, Robert. This woman, she was in the priority line. And I—" "You what?" Robert snapped, cutting her off. "Did you look at her ticket?" Well, eventually, yes, she was first class, but her attitude, Robert's face flushed with anger and disbelief. "Cynthia, do you have any idea who that was? That was Dr. Imani Carter. Her company, Oratech, is one of the biggest tech firms in the country. Their corporate account is managed out of our Chicago headquarters. It's enormous." He ran a hand over his balding head, the stress visibly aging him. "Where is she? I need to fix this." The young agent pointed a trembling finger down the concourse. "They just left, sir. Heading toward the main exit." Without another word to Cynthia, Robert broke into a clumsy run, weaving through the crowd of passengers. He spotted the Oratech group, just as they reached the edge of the secure area. "Dr. Carter," he called out, his voice slightly breathless. "Ma'am, please, a moment of your time." Imani stopped and turned, her expression unreadable. Her team halted behind her, forming a silent, protective wall. Robert Maxwell skidded to a stop in front of her, smoothing his tie and trying to compose himself. "Dr. Carter, Robert Maxwell, Duty Operations Manager," he panted. "On behalf of Continental Apex Air, I want to offer my sincerest, most profound apologies for any misunderstanding that may have occurred at the gate." He produced a practiced, sympathetic smile. It was the smile of a man trained in de-escalation, designed to soothe the ruffled feathers with a veneer of corporate contrition. Imani's gaze was unwavering. "Mr. Maxwell, there was no misunderstanding. Your gate agent was explicitly and deliberately discriminatory." She refused to believe a black woman could be a first-class passenger. "That isn't a misunderstanding. It is a clear statement of prejudice." Robert's smile faltered. This wasn't going to be a simple, "we're sorry, here's a voucher" situation. "I assure you, Dr. Carter, that is not what our airline stands for. The agent in question, she's a veteran employee, perhaps a bit overzealous in enforcing the rules, but I'm sure she meant no personal offense." It was the worst possible thing he could have said. It was an excuse, a defense of the indefensible. Meant no personal offense. Imani's voice was still quiet, but it now held a dangerous undercurrent. "Mr. Maxwell, do you think racism is only a problem when it's personal? Your agent's bias is a systemic issue, one you are now attempting to minimize with corporate platitudes. She didn't see me a paying customer. She saw a stereotype. And your first instinct is to defend her, not to address the egregious behavior. That tells me everything I need to know about your company's culture." David Chen stepped forward slightly. "Mr. Maxwell, we have 50 employees here. We were on our way to London to close a deal worth over $200 million to our company. The success of that deal relies on our team being focused, respected, and secure. This incident has demonstrated that we can't rely on your airline for even the most basic level of professional courtesy. The risk of entrusting our people and our business to your service is now, in our assessment, unacceptably high." Robert's face went pale. The number 200 million hung in the air, eclipsing even Imani's earlier mention of their travel account. "Please," he pleaded, his professional demeanor cracking. "Let's not be hasty. I will personally escort you and your entire team onto the plane. I will guarantee you the most comfortable flight possible. We will open an immediate formal investigation into the agent's conduct. We'll fire her if that's what it takes. Just please don't do this." Imani gave a small, sad shake of her head. "Mr. Maxwell, this is no longer a negotiation. You seem to think this is about my personal comfort. It's not. It's about the integrity of my company and the well-being of my employees. Firing one agent now under duress is a bandage on a festering wound. It doesn't solve the problem. It just hides the symptom. The problem is a culture that allowed her to feel comfortable acting that way in the first place, and a management that excuses it as overzealousness." She glanced at her phone. "Our new travel arrangements have been made. Our baggage is being offloaded. We will send you a bill for the associated costs of this disruption. Goodbye, Mr. Maxwell." She turned, and this time there was no stopping her. The entire Oratech team moved as one, a silent tide flowing out of the terminal, leaving the duty manager standing alone, the magnitude of the disaster finally crashing down upon him. He had not just failed to put out the fire, he had poured gasoline on it. Back at the gate, Cynthia watched him trudge back, his face ashen. He walked right past her, picked up the radio, and spoke in a low, grim voice. "Security to gate B24. Escort Ms. Vance to the operations office. Her credentials are to be suspended effective immediately." Cynthia's world tilted on its axis. "Robert, wait!" she cried out. "You can't do this. It was a mistake." He finally turned to look at her, and his eyes were devoid of any sympathy. "You didn't just make a mistake, Cynthia," he said, his voice cold with fury. "You just cost us the Oratech account. You probably cost us a hell of a lot more than that. You're done." The aftershock of Imani's silent gesture was no longer a tremor. It was a full-blown earthquake, and the ground was just beginning to crack open beneath continental apex air. The story didn't stay within the sterile confines of JFK for long. In the age of social media, secrets have the lifespan of a mayfly. Lucas Peterson, the young tech student who had been watching the entire drama unfold, was already typing furiously on his phone before Imani's team had even cleared security. He hadn't recorded a video, he felt that would be an invasion, but he had absorbed every word, every gesture. He was a huge admirer of Dr. Imani Carter, having followed Oratech's rise for a class project. Seeing his idol in person, and then witnessing that raw, powerful display of principle, had left him buzzing with adrenaline. He posted a detailed account of the incident on X, formerly Twitter and LinkedIn, tagging both Oratech and continental apex air. He didn't use inflammatory language. He simply reported what he saw and heard: the gate agent's condescending dismissal, Dr. Carter's calm and steely response, the quiet efficiency of her team's withdrawal, and the duty manager's failed attempt at an apology. He ended his post with a simple line: "Today I saw what true leadership looks like. It's not about shouting the loudest. It's about the quiet, unshakable power of your convictions. Oratech doesn't just build the future, they live by it. Continental Apex Air has a lot to answer for." The posts exploded. Within an hour, it had been retweeted thousands of times. Tech journalists, diversity and inclusion advocates, and business leaders picked it up. The hashtags Oratech and Flying While Black started trending. Lucas's eyewitness account, because of its measured tone and detailed accuracy, was seen as highly credible. The story was compelling David versus Goliath, except David was a black female CEO, and Goliath was a multi-billion-dollar airline corporation. By the time Imani and her team were settling into a private lounge at a nearby executive airfield, waiting for their chartered Gulfstream G650, the story was the lead item on several major news websites. Continental Apex Air's social media channels were being inundated with furious comments. Their stock, which had been stable at the market's open, began to show a noticeable dip. The ripples reached far beyond public perception. Inside the gleaming antiseptic headquarters of Transatlantic Airways Group, TAG, the parent company of Continental Apex Air, the news landed like a grenade. Mr. Harrison, the CEO of TAG, a man known for his ruthless efficiency and icy demeanor, was in a quarterly budget meeting when his chief of communications burst in, phone in hand, his face pale. "So we have a 5-alarm fire," the communications chief said, dispensing with pleasantries. The meeting was halted. The story was laid out for Mr. Harrison. His initial reaction was one of intense anger directed at the incompetence at JFK. One gate agent, one manager, and they couldn't contain this, fire them both. Issue a public apology and offer the company 1 million frequent flyer miles. Make it go away. "It's not that simple, sir," the comms chief replied, swallowing hard. "There's a complication, a very large one." He slid a tablet across the polished mahogany table. "It's about the deal Oratech was flying to London to sign." Mr. Harrison looked at the screen. It was an internal briefing document. "Their partnership is with Neurolink Dynamics," the chief explained. The name hit Harrison like a physical blow. He didn't need to read any further. Neurolink, he whispered, the color draining from his face. Neurolink Dynamics was not just any medical tech company. They were a key strategic partner for TAG's burgeoning and highly profitable air freight division. TAG had just signed a massive exclusive 10-year contract worth an estimated $500 million to be the sole global carrier for Neurolink's sensitive high-value medical hardware. The ink was barely dry. The partnership was announced the previous week with much fanfare, promising to be a cornerstone of TAG's future growth. "Go on," Harrison said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Neurolink's next-generation surgical simulators, the ones our new freight contract is built around, require a new haptic feedback system to function, a system that provides realistic tactile sensations for training surgeons. According to our intel, there's only one company in the world that makes a system that meets Neurolink's rigorous specifications." A dreadful silence filled the boardroom. Oratech Innovations. Harrison finished the name, now tasting like ash in his mouth. The communications chief nodded grimly. Dr. Carter wasn't just flying to London to sign a deal for her company. She was flying to complete the final piece of our $500 million puzzle. If Oratech pulls out of their deal with Neurolink because of what happened today, Neurolink's new product line is dead in the water, and their C-suite is going to want to know why their exclusive air freight partner just torpedoed their flagship product launch through sheer unadulterated incompetence. The scale of the catastrophe was now terrifyingly clear. This was no longer about a lost corporate travel account. It was no longer about a PR nightmare. The stupid, prejudiced actions of a single gate agent at JFK had jeopardized a contract that was fundamental to the parent company's 10-year strategic plan. The financial fallout wouldn't be measured in thousands or even a few million. It could be a $100 million chain reaction implosion. Mr. Harrison stood up, his face a mask of cold fury. The quiet, calm power of Dr. Imani Carter's silent gesture had reached all the way to his C-suite, and it was now threatening to bring the whole house down. "Get me Robert Maxwell from JFK on the line." "Now," he commanded. Then he looked at his assistant. "And get me a phone number for Dr. Imani Carter. Don't tell me you can't find it. I don't care if you have to call the president. Get it." The reverberations were becoming a tidal wave. Cynthia Vance sat in a sterile, windowless office in the airport's administrative wing. For 2 hours she had been left alone with a cup of cold coffee and the echoing words of Robert Maxwell. Her security badge and company ID lay on the table in front of her, inert pieces of plastic that had until this morning defined a large part of her identity. For 22 years she had been Cynthia Vance, employee of Continental Apex Air. Now she was just Cynthia. Her mind replayed the incident in a torturous loop. In her version, she was still the victim. The woman Dr. Carter had been haughty. She had an air about her. Cynthia had simply been enforcing the rules, trying to keep the line moving. It wasn't about race. It was about procedure. She clung to this narrative like a life raft in a churning sea of panic, but a small, treacherous part of her mind kept showing her the facts. She hadn't asked to see the ticket. She had made an assumption based on what the woman was black. That was it. That was the beginning and the end of her calculation. She had seen countless white men and women in expensive clothes breeze through the first-class line without a second thought. But this woman had triggered something in her, a deep-seated, unexamined prejudice that had lashed out on instinct. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her sister. Cindy, are you okay? Turn on the news. With trembling hands, she pulled up a news app. The headline was stark. Tech CEO Dr. Imani Carter pulls team from flight after alleged racial profiling by airline staff. Her heart hammered against her ribs. They were talking about her. The whole world was talking about her. The article contained quotes from Lucas Peterson's viral post. It mentioned the immediate grounding of her 50-person team and the cancellation of a major international partnership meeting. Then a new alert popped up, a statement from Transatlantic Airways Group. TAG and its subsidiary Continental Apex Air have been made aware of a deeply disturbing incident at JFK today. The alleged behavior is unacceptable and runs contrary to our core values of respect and inclusion. A full and swift investigation is underway. The employee in question has been suspended without pay, pending the results of this investigation. We are making every attempt to reach out to Dr. Carter and the team at Oratech to apologize directly and make this right. Suspended without pay. The words were cold and final. Her life raft was sinking. Just then the door opened. Robert Maxwell entered, followed by two stern-looking individuals in corporate suits she didn't recognize. They were from TAG headquarters. The reckoning had arrived. The investigation was brutal and efficient. They didn't ask about her feelings or her intentions. They asked about her actions. "Miss Vance, did you ask to see Doctor?" Carter's boarding pass before directing her to the economy line. One of the suits asked, his voice flat. "No, but—" "Yes or no, Miss Vance?" "No." "So you made an assumption about her eligibility for priority boarding without looking at her official documentation," I thought. "What was this assumption based on, Miss Vance?" the second suit pressed. Cynthia was silent. What could she say? She didn't look like the other first-class passengers. The bigotry inherent in that thought was suddenly sickeningly clear even to her. I made a mistake," she whispered. The interrogation continued, stripping away every layer of her self-defense until she was left exposed and humiliated. At the end, the first suit slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a termination agreement. "Your employment with Continental Apex Air is terminated effective immediately for gross misconduct and a violation of the company's anti-discrimination policies," he stated. "Sign here." As she stared at the paper, her world collapsing, her phone buzzed again. It was a reminder notification from her calendar. Appointment, Dr. Edwards, Adam's neuroscan results. A wave of nausea washed over her. Her son, Adam. He was 14, and for the past year, he had been battling a rare degenerative neurological condition that was slowly affecting his motor control. Local doctors were stumped. They had finally been referred to a specialist in Boston, Dr. Edwards, who was part of a trial program for a new diagnostic technology. The results were due today. It was the one thread of hope she had been clinging to for months. Later that afternoon, sitting in her car in the airport parking lot, a terminated employee, a public pariah she called the doctor's office. "Cynthia, it's Dr. Edwards." The kind voice on the other end said, "I have the results of Adam's scans. The good news is we have a definitive diagnosis. The bad news is that it's progressing, but there is a new treatment on the horizon. It's revolutionary. It involves a targeted haptic feedback therapy to help the brain remap neural pathways. It's shown incredible results in early trials." Cynthia felt a flicker of hope. Haptic feedback. What is that? Who makes it? It's an amazing technology. Dr. Edwards continued, his voice filled with genuine excitement. It allows us to create precise, tactile sensations that stimulate the damaged parts of the nervous system. The system we're hoping to get for our program, the one that could truly help Adam, is made by a company called Oratech Innovations. It's considered the absolute gold standard. The phone slipped from Cynthia's fingers and clattered onto the passenger seat. Oratech Innovations. The name echoed in the silent car. The company founded by the woman she had scorned. The technology that held the only real hope for her son's future was the product of the very mind she had dismissed. The irony was so crushing, so cosmically cruel, that she couldn't even cry. It wasn't just her job she had lost. It wasn't just her reputation. Her blind, senseless prejudice had led her to insult the one person, the one company on the planet that might have been able to save her child. She had not just been wrong. She had been calamitously, life-alteringly wrong. This was the true consequence. Not a lost paycheck, but a lost future. The weight of it was absolute, and it broke her completely. The Gulfstream G650 was a world away from the chaotic terminal at JFK. It was a capsule of serene luxury and quiet purpose, slicing through the thin, dark air 8 miles above the churning Atlantic. The bespoke cabin, finished in cream leather and dark walnut, was a mobile headquarters. There was no sense of celebration, no victorious chatter. Instead, a low hum of focused energy pervaded the space. Near the front, 2 lead engineers, oblivious to the opulence around them, had their heads bent over a holographic display, their styluses dancing as they refined a schematic. Further back, Sophia, the legal counsel, was reviewing the Neurolink contract with a fine-toothed comb, her expression intense. The team was disappointed by the delay, but galvanized by the principle. They were not just employees. They were stakeholders in the culture Imani had built, and they moved with the quiet confidence of people who knew their leader had chosen the harder, righter path. Imani Carter sat alone in a forward club seat, a tablet displaying market data resting unread on her lap. She stared out the curved window, not at the blanket of clouds below, but at the impossible star-dusted darkness of the upper atmosphere. The incident at the gate replayed in her mind, not with the heat of anger anymore, but with a cool, analytical detachment. She weighed the cost of her decision. The charter flight was an unplanned, 6-figure expense. The disruption to her team's schedule was significant, and the risk to the Neurolink deal, however small, was real. She felt the immense weight of her responsibility. For 50 people, she had unilaterally altered their plans, upended their work, and thrown a grenade into a meticulously planned operation. She had done it for a principle, but principles had costs. Had the price been too high, David Chen approached and took the seat opposite her, his expression calm as ever. He seemed to read her thoughts. "No one is second-guessing you, Imani," he said softly. "You should see the messages on the team's internal channels. They're proud, they feel seen. What you did today was an investment in our company's soul. That always pays the highest dividend." Imani managed a small, grateful smile. "Our company's soul is expensive, David." "The best things always are," he replied. "So what's the next move? Harrison's office has been calling Maria every 5 minutes for the past hour. They're desperate." "Desperation leads to mistakes," Imani mused, her strategic mind taking over. "Or it leads to clarity. We're about to find out which it is." As if on cue, her private satellite phone chirped. It was Maria. "Dr. Carter, I apologize for the intrusion. Mr. Alistair Harrison is on the line. He has bypassed my attempts to schedule a call and is citing an urgent matter of extreme mutual importance. He sounds contained but under significant pressure." Imani paused, considering her options. She held all the cards. She could let him wait, let him stew in the crisis his company had created. But that was a power play, not a solution. And Imani was a builder, a solver. Put him through, Maria." A moment later, a man's voice, crisp and carrying the polished accent of the global elite, filled the quiet cabin. "Dr. Carter Alistair Harrison, thank you for taking my call." "Mr. Harrison," Imani replied, her voice a flat, cool surface. She would give him nothing to start. "Dr. Carter, I'll be direct. I've been fully briefed on the disgraceful event at JFK this morning. On behalf of the entire Transatlantic Airways Group, I want to offer you my most sincere and unconditional apology. The behavior of our employee was appalling, a complete failure to uphold the values of respect and service we claim to stand for." It was a textbook corporate apology, well delivered, but generic. "I appreciate the sentiment, Mr. Harrison," Imani said, her tone unmoved. "But I've already received a similar apology from your Mr. Maxwell, right before he tried to excuse the behavior as overzealousness." A sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Imani had just shown him that empty words were useless. Mr. Maxwell's handling of the situation was a case study in incompetence, and it is being dealt with severely. Harrison said, his voice tightening. "The gate agent's employment has been terminated. But I know that's not a solution. That's a reaction." "It's a necessary one, but you're right, it's not a solution," Imani agreed. "The solution would be to address the culture that made your agent feel empowered to act on her prejudice in the first place." This was the crux of it. Harrison seemed to understand he was not dealing with a typical aggrieved customer. "You are absolutely correct, and that is why I am calling. Dr. Carter, I am aware that your flight to London was for a meeting with Neurolink Dynamics." He paused, letting the name hang in the air. "I am also aware that Oratech's technology is the keystone for their new surgical simulator, the same simulator that is the cornerstone of a new $500 million exclusive freight contract we recently signed with them." He had laid his cards on the table. It was a stunning admission of vulnerability, and, in a strange way, a sign of respect. He was treating her not as a victim, but as a player on his level. "So you're not just calling as the CEO of the airline that insulted me," Imani stated, connecting the dots. "You're calling as a man whose very significant business deal is now at risk because of that insult." "Yes," Harrison admitted, the single word costing him visible effort. "My company's failure has put my other business interests in jeopardy. It's a mess of my organization's own making. I own that, which is why I am not calling to ask for a favor. I am calling to propose a new foundation for our relationship, should you be willing to even consider one." Imani leaned forward, slightly intrigued. "I'm listening." "First, we will refund every dollar Oratech has spent with any tag-owned airline for the past fiscal year. Second, we will cover all costs associated with this disruption, including the charter of your current flight. Third, and most importantly, I am personally committing $10 million to fund a complete overhaul of our diversity, equity, and inclusion training for all 60,000 of our global customer-facing employees, and I want Oratech to be a paid consultant in the selection of the firm that will design and implement that program. I want your standards to become our standards." It was an immense, concrete, and systemic proposal. It went far beyond what she expected. "Who would have oversight?" Imani pressed, testing him. "How would you measure success? A $10 million program is just a PR stunt if it doesn't lead to verifiable change." "An independent board," Harrison countered immediately, "with a seat for a representative of your choosing. We'll establish metrics based on independent audits and customer feedback. We will be transparent. We will make the results public for better or for worse. We have to be better. You've shown me that in the most painful way possible." Imani was silent for a long moment. This was what real change looked like. Not an angry tweet or a lawsuit, but a fundamental shift in corporate policy, bought and paid for by the company's own failure. "Send me the proposal in writing, Mr. Harrison," she said finally. "Every detail. I will review it after my business in London is concluded. That is all I can promise you right now." "Thank you, Dr. Carter," he said, the relief in his voice palpable. "That is more than I deserve." The call ended. David looked at her, his eyebrows raised. "That," he said, "was a masterclass. You didn't just get an apology. You got a budget and a seat at the table." "Progress, David," Imani said, a flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. "That's the only victory that matters." 2 days later, Imani stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of her suite at the Corinthia, looking out over the Thames. The meeting with Neuralink had been a resounding success. Their CEO, Dr. Anya Sharma, had greeted her with a warm embrace. "I heard what happened, Imani," she'd said. "What you did took courage. It's the same courage we see in your company's technology. We are proud to be your partner." The deal was signed, the future secured. Her phone chimed with an incoming, encrypted file from a trusted information source she occasionally used for deep-level corporate due diligence. The file was labeled JFK Incident Follow-Up. She opened it, scanning the dry factual report of the firings, the corporate scrambling the internal memos. And then she came to a small, human interest addendum. It was a brief profile of Cynthia Vance. It detailed her 22 years of service, her modest life in Queens, and a single devastating detail. Her 14-year-old son, Adam, was suffering from a rare neurological disorder. The report named the condition and the specialist in Boston overseeing his case, and noted that the boy's only hope for a functional recovery was a new experimental therapy, a therapy that relied on a state-of-the-art haptic feedback system, the system made by Oratech Innovations. Imani read the paragraph again, and then a third time. The city lights of London blurred. The cosmic, crushing irony of it was suffocating. She pictured the woman's face, pinched with bitterness and misplaced authority. She pictured that same woman sitting in a doctor's office, hearing that the only hope for her child was being produced by the very company, the very person she had so casually and hatefully dismissed. There was no triumph in this knowledge. There was no feeling of righteous vindication. There was only a profound, hollow sadness. A woman's prejudice, a poison she had carried for years, had not only cost her a job, but it had also, in a way, targeted her own son. She walked over to the desk and called David in the adjacent suite. When he arrived, she simply handed him the tablet. He read it, and his normally stoic face fell. "My God," he whispered. "To be so consumed by hate, you end up standing in the way of a miracle for your own child." He looked at Imani. "It's a tragic story. But it's her story, Imani." She made her bed. "Did her son?" Imani asked quietly. "He's 14, David. He didn't do anything. He's just sick. And the purpose of our work, the reason we push so hard and build these impossible things, is to help people. It's to give a surgeon a steadier hand, a pilot a better feel for their plane, and maybe to give a sick kid a chance to get better. We can't let her bigotry become a barrier to our own mission." David understood immediately. He saw the path she was paving. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to do what a builder does," she said. "I'm going to build a bridge." Her first call was to Boston. She got Dr. Edwards on the line, introduced herself, and listened as he spoke with passion about his research. Then she made her offer. "Doctor, as part of our new Oratech Cares initiative, we are donating 3 of our new Neurohaptic 7 systems to your hospital's research program. We will also provide an on-site technician for 6 months to ensure seamless integration. We believe in your work." The doctor was left speechless, stammering his thanks. Her second call was to Oratech's chief financial officer. Her instructions were precise. "You will work with the Children's Neurological Health Foundation of New York. You are to create a new fully endowed grant. It will be named the Anonymous Pioneer Grant. Its purpose is to fully fund all treatment, travel, and accommodation costs for one patient and their guardian to participate in Dr. Edward's Boston program. The first recipient of this grant will be a 14-year-old boy from Queens named Adam Vance. My name, or the name Oratech, is to never be associated with it. Is that perfectly clear?" It was. When the calls were done, Imani went back to the window. The vast, sprawling city below was a web of interconnected lights and lives. She had arrived in London, having performed one silent gesture of immense power, cancelling a flight with a single message, tearing down a wall of disrespect. Now she had performed another. A quiet, anonymous act of grace that would open a door, build a bridge, and offer a new flight path toward healing. One gesture was for her dignity. This one was for her soul. This story reveals a powerful truth. True strength isn't found in the volume of your voice, but in the conviction of your actions. Doctor, Imani Carter's silent gesture did more than cancel a flight. It sent a shockwave through a corporate giant, forcing it to confront a prejudice it preferred to ignore. But the story doesn't end with retribution. It ends with a quiet act of immense grace, proving that the ultimate power is the ability to rise above the very ignorance that sought to diminish you. It's a stark reminder that our biases have real-world consequences, sometimes in ways we can never imagine. If this story of principal power and profound grace resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next story about the moments that define us. What did you think of Dr. Carter's final decision? Let us know in the comments below.